Right. Well, can you talk about your role and relationship to care work?
Well, in some ways, my relationship is by necessity quite distant now. My job is to make sure that the staff who are involved in care in this organisation have what they need so that they can serve best those who um, are referred to us or refer themselves to us so that we can go on a journey with them. And my perspective is that our task is to journey with people. Our task is not to sort people's lives out for them, but help them, but walk with them as they sort their lives out themselves. Um, but that requires me to give my staff the right support, training, insight, challenge, and resource so that they're well equipped for that journey. So I suppose that's the way I'm now involved in care.
And your position would be, so you're chief executive officer.
Yes.
And so that means the buck stops with you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. If it goes pear shaped, it's on my watch, right? And I have to, and partly because of the culture I want to engender in this thing, is that I operate a no blame culture, right? So if something does go wrong, my first response is not to point the finger, but to ask what do we need to do together to fix this, and then learn from it. But ultimately, my head is on whatever block appears on a given day.
And Cyrenians, of course, is a discrete organisation amongst many. And what superstructures are above you?
There is only one. I'm the point of contact and the person to whom given delegated powers by a board of trustees. They are created by a trustee created in 1968, and with some adaptations that is still essentially what we work to. But other than that, there is no other superstructure. The board is made up of unpaid, but reasonably either qualified or experienced individuals whose task it is to make sure that we have the right strategies in place and making legal decisions, given that we are working primarily, although not entirely, but primarily with other people's money, and that we're meeting our regulatory requirements to provide the care that we provide.
Can you talk about what successes have you had in providing this care work and in managing this complex group of people?
Successes, that's an interesting question. I've just had my appraisal and it was reasonably good, so I guess I've had some successes. I'm a bit too Presbyterian to be saying it was all down to me. I think if it were a success, it would be we're not short of people coming to us when they have a challenge or a need for somebody to go on a journey with them, and that would need to be a sign of success. There are a legion of stories of people who will tell you that journey changed their lives. We're about to do a big brand relaunch, and at the heart of that will be 50 stories of individuals who are willing to say, I once was and now I am, because that's the message. And that's very powerful if people are willing to put themselves on the line and say, and let others know of that transformation. And I think that's probably a sign of the kind of human culture success that we have created. And well, it was here before I came, but I've continued to nurture. There are some organisational successes where, last year we only a little bit, but we managed to increase our funding overall. In this day and age, that's a success. We've maintained our staff levels. That's a success. We've ridden out a couple of crises, and the fact that you or other people don't know about them is a sign of success. So, but they're organisational things. For me, are more people coming to us and then willing to say that their experience with us was positive for them? The answer is yes. So that would be my definition of success.
the logo you've got is a squiggling line. Uh, I'd like to hear your thoughts on
Well, not for much longer.
not for a lot.
The
Right, okay.
brand will change. There'll be a launch at the end of October with a new one. When I first came in, I thought it was a seagull with a broken wing. It is supposed to imply, the journey of change is an up and down journey, and from that point of view, it's accurate. I suppose my thought is if you have to explain a logo, it's missed the point. So that sounds very rude. I don't mean to be rude. It's just
No.
these things happen. I can see why people made that choice, and I see what it is. Actually, I've looked at it many times, and I think the problem is not the squiggly line. It's the fact that the tips go to points, and that's what make it look like wings.
Yeah.
So it's an unintended consequence.
So I'd like to know, do the current systems of administration help you in achieving the successes?
No, I think that's an area where we have some big changes to make. I think we struggle on our IT infrastructure. I think we know in our plan that we need to improve that quite significantly, particularly as we have more and more people being mobile and satellite places. We've got 7 offices, and the best way you can describe their IT infrastructure would be variable in its quality. I think the way we hold our information on that digitally is also not helpful. Fun enough, we had a discussion at our most recent staff forum about things that were holding staff, but we asked staff what holds you back, and they rightly identified that as one of the key areas. So we've got to do a radical reassessment of that. And in fact, we need a whole new, what I would call content management system, basically, so that staff can get what they need quickly, and feed into that effectively. We need to do that for our finances, for our HR, for our client support information, for our marketing, and for our storytelling. That's why, notwithstanding your commentary here, we're going on the journey of the outcome star, right across the board, so that we can get an insight into those journeys that people take, but in a consistent way, so that we hear those voices effectively and we gather them well, so we can tell that story more effectively.
Superb. Can you talk about the difficulties of measuring the outcomes of your work?
Well, the primary difficulty is human. It's about how do you tell your story, and everybody has, at some level, a sense of the journey they've been on, but to describe that in words and also to say what were the trigger points, I think is hugely challenging. The British longitudinal study, I don't know if I spoke to you this before, but British longitudinal study, which followed the lives of everybody born in Britain between the 5th and 12th of April 1970. It's a massive study, so there's several thousand. And of course there's a bit of drop off and all the rest of it, but it's consistently over the years has kind of done a whole variety of ways of kind of assessing things like socioeconomic impact on people's lives and decisions and all that kind of stuff. Anyway, that group of people were asked, and it was quite deliberately a subjective feeling question that they were asked when they were 35, do you feel successful in your life? And of that group, the number that felt successful, and then went in and said, what is it that means you feel successful? Now it is, as I say, deliberately a feeling question, because it's an emotional response to your circumstances rather than a quantitative response, because it's a human thing. Anyway, they looked at that, and of that group, who said, yes, I feel successful in my life, the common factor was not the socioeconomic background, was not the educational standard qualifications of the mother, was not whether or not the family had stayed together, was not what either they had made or whether they were in a family or all those things. The common factor was the level, and they were able to do this because of course they've been following these guys for 35 years, was the level of self-confidence when those people were 10 years old. Now, self-confidence is an extraordinary, it's one of the most important human things in terms of our resilience, our capacity to have relationships, all those things that are fundamental, but it's really hard to measure. And if it goes, what is it you need to do to replace it? If you've got 10 people in the room, it'll be 10 different things. So I think that whole business about outcomes is hugely challenging. However, I have to be able to tell this story well, effectively, rigorously, and robustly. And so I need to do something. And that's why, having looked at various things, we've gone for the outcome star with all its limitations, because it seems to us to be, it's got a decent background to it, it's been thought through. It does appear to me to have a reasonable element of ownership by all the people involved, even though one of your critiques is the design didn't, but I think that's a fair point, but and it's not too complex. It's not trying to measure a matrix of 36 outcomes. It's a series of 5 things, and I think it's got merit, because this organisation won't survive if I can't tell the story. If the story's about people, I need to tell people stories, but they need to be consistent.
Again, in defence of the outcome star, these are my initial and considered responses, and after speaking to them directly, they were saying, "Oh well, there's an awful lot of thinking here, and there's training that goes with this." Yeah. So the document's initial. It's an initial starting point, and my experience of working with Oscar and Evelyn, Karen, all that humanity was brought in through. So
yeah, but these are they're fair questions, the ones you ask, and we need to keep asking them, because the problem comes when it becomes too systematized and loses the human element. So that's what's really important to me. It's how do I capture but don't define or limit the human element.
Can you think of helpful and unhelpful examples of bureaucracies in relation to your work?
Where would you like me to start? I think actually the biggest challenge at the moment is that the public sector's budget challenges mean that they are unable to think with any sense of innovation. And that has meant that what was always a problem has become a bigger problem, which is the procurement process has kicked in as the way in which you evidence value, where in fact it does none of the things it's supposed to do. Procurement is supposed to evidence accountability, transparency, and good value. The trouble is that nobody knows who took the decision, nobody knows why the decision was made, and they confuse cost and value because they're not the same thing. Price, cost, and value are the 3 very different things, even though they're all about the same number. And because it's a more and more competitive context, because there's less money about, procurement is having a bigger and bigger effect. At the same time, there's a series of legislative challenges around procurement and public sector money being brought more into focus because of that competitive element, because everybody wants a piece of the pie, so they're using every weapon they can, which makes the public sector even more cautious than it's ever been before. So I go and talk to folk who I know in the councils, and because of my background, I can knock on a door, and generally speaking, the door will open, and we can have a chat. And I say to them, look, here's a bit of innovation. If we do this with us for a period of time, we'll evidence that we've made savings. Can we have a go at this? And they'll go, yeah, it all adds up, but it's got to go to tender. So why is that? Well, procurement says European rules. I say, well, under £50,000, you can do a pilot. We're not really prepared. We know we've got that power, but we'd rather not do that because we fear somebody else yelping about it. So of all the bureaucracies, it's the culture created and really brought into focus by that budgetary challenge. So you can't have those conversations that we might have had once before. And the tools that are being brought to the fore, particularly around procurement, mean that the relationship makes the making of real proper relationships between institutions and organisations much more difficult.
You mentioned the tools that are brought to
a procurement tool, basically. Yeah.
Right.
Everything is through procurement.
Right. So can you think of helpful examples of what?
Yeah, we're investigating one at the moment, which has been led by Dundee Council and the Robertson Trust, and Dundee Council get lots of credit for this. And the example is there are 4 schools in Dundee. If I can remember the name, I can't remember the name of the project, but I will get it before the end of this conversation, I tell you. But they had a huge problem with truancy, and it was costing lots of money. So the Robertson Trust and 3 organisations, Apex, Bernardo's and somebody else, said, if we run this programme, we will significantly reduce truancy to the point at which we can evidence that you will make serious savings based on the money you're having to budget for just now. And they said, what we'll do is this. We'll structure this so that we'll run it for free for 2 years, right? To prove the evidence. And if we can prove the evidence, will you commit to funding us for another 3 years? And if it's costing you Y, we'll only charge, with that funding for 3 years, we'll charge you for X, which will be less than Y, but will be enough for us to run our project and pay back the loan that we've taken to run it for 2 years for free. So it's a 5-year project. And the Robertson Trust, because the Robertson Trust are always trying to develop things that have an exit strategy, so you're not constantly dependent on charitable giving, and this would be an example. They're going to put their money up, and the council have said, yeah, we're prepared to guarantee. So in other words, it doesn't have to go to tender. If you reach those after 2 years, we'll give it you for another 3 years. Right? It's a new way of innovating funding, and the plus for the council is they can budget for those savings because they're going to save money. The plus for the third sector is that A, there's an exit strategy, B, there's a recognition of their work, and C, that they say to their staff, you deliver and your job's guaranteed a minimum of 5 years.
Right. So, do you feel that the sector is adequately funded or resourced?
No, but it'll never be. There'll be times when we've got more money and times when we get less money. But we work in a world of human need, and that need is right across the board, from people with incredible levels of lifetime conditions that the public sector can never provide all for. So there needs to be that other additional resources, to people whose passion is not human beings but animals, right? And that's a full spectrum, but it's a couple of extremes to compare to each other. So the idea that somehow there would be a time when the third sector has all the money it ever needed is a myth. What you have to do is think, how can I most effectively get the resources I can get to best meet the level of need I can, given the capacity I have. And the other thing is that the sector at the moment is quite skewed. So there's a small number of really quite big organisations, and they frankly soak up everything. And the sector is therefore undermined because those small organisations who actually are better at a local level of providing real grassroots stuff than the big ones. No matter what the big ones think, they're big. As soon as you're, I mean, we're one of them. I mean, we're kind of in the middle. We're still quite grassroots, but we're getting bigger, and we're going to lose something the bigger we get. So those small ones it's much more difficult for them to continue to be as effective as they can, and that's where I think there's a real problem over how the resource is distributed.
How often do the funding administration systems change, and do they have continuity?
No, and the closer it is to the public sector, the more it changes. I mean, I'll tell you, at the moment, we got a contract about a year ago, which was a change from a previous one. So we made some changes in how we delivered it, and in the process, agreed to take a 10% cut because we knew they were struggling, but it meant that we could continue the work. And by operating a bit differently, we reckon we could, and I think we have. Being able to maintain the same level of service. There's still question about it, but it's not bad, and it was fair. They were upfront. It was transparent. It was clear. And then along came a suggestion that we'd take another 10% cut. We told them to take a hike because we couldn't, having gone through what we've gone through, cut some more. And now there's talk of there's a real threat of changing the money from being a block grant to being payment by results. And we still don't know how they're going to calculate the payment by results, but they're telling us they're going to do it, whilst at the same time reviewing what we've done from the change that we made previously. And they're trying to say that there is a difference between the review and the decision to move to payment by results. And we'll say, well, what if the review tells you that payment by results won't work? Well, those are two separate decisions. And by that point, I'm just going to hit my head off a brick wall, So, on the other hand, as the chair of Children in Need Scotland, our policies, generally speaking, have stayed pretty consistent for the last 15 years. And some might argue that we haven't changed enough because circumstances have changed. And there's now, I think, very helpful talk in that world that actually the consistency that we have provided is becoming a barrier, because the things that people now tell us they need to meet the needs of the young people we want them to serve are such that our regulations mean they can't apply to us. So it's not at all change is bad. That's what I'm saying.
Yes. Yeah. Right. Okay. So do the funding structures allow you to plan long term?
No, not really. I am on a plan to change the funding, the balance of funding income streams to this organisation, so that we're less dependent on the public sector, and we're generating more of our own income. And if we can include in that a decent tranche of earned income, i.e., selling our wares one way or another through social enterprise, then we will be able to make longer term decisions. But there are limits to that too. And as we know from the crash in 2008, it doesn't matter how big or how long you've been around. There's no such thing as permanent in the world of income. You can have it's more likely if you have more control over it, but there's no such thing as permanent, and we need to be realistic about that.
So you mentioned the crash and the sort of the economic big picture. Has this? How does this factor into your work, your colleagues' work, and ultimately the people that you're working with?
There's several things that at the client, there are still people who we're working with who began on a journey of requiring support as a consequence of the crash. People who lost their homes, people who lost their jobs and therefore their homes, and or developed other personal challenges as a consequence. All those kinds of things, and the flow through from that is still there. Secondly, it created a context in which the politics of austerity was created, which led to the ideology of the reduction of the state. So the mythology that we need to reduce the state, both deficit and debt, to the levels that are being done by the present government, is framed by the austerity experience, but is an ideology that's causing more problems for us, and it's particularly impacting on things around welfare reform. I mean, the issues that we're now facing as a consequence of welfare reform are frankly scary, and the levels of exclusion that are coming as a consequence are absolutely enormous. However, to me, there's another element that's also quite significant that we need to explore more deeply, is that the so-called recovery is predicated on a new employment structure, much more around 0 hours, low wages, insecure jobs, low training, frankly, apart from that group of things that are in the high tech. So if I tell you that the economy of Edinburgh over the next 10 years, the analysis of where there'll be big areas for work are construction, care, and IT. Now, only one of them is what you would call high skilled. The construction industry is for some medium skilled, but a lot is kind of labor intensive, and the care industry has a small number of skilled jobs, but primarily it's low paid and low skilled, which is pretty bad given that it's dealing with some of the most vulnerable. But that tells you something about where employment's going to be. And if we keep saying the answer to your other social problems often is the security of a job, but the jobs we're offering them are insecure and low paid, it is less likely that will play the supportive role in change that we once believed it would. So you can see there's a whole series of factors that have come out of that crash that we need to come at a number of levels.
Is this a shift towards sort of an Americanization of the UK from a mixed market economy, where there was the freedom to truck and barter, for example, mixed with certain things were stabilized and government regulated, to something that's much more driven by entrepreneurs? The philanthropy in society is to be largely driven by the proceeds of private enterprise.
I think there are signs that we're heading that direction, but there's a number of questions to be asked about that, and there's some positives and negatives. So the negative is that we talk about the entrepreneurial spirit and self-employment. Now, one of the reasons people end up in self-employment is because they can't get a job, right? So they end up doing their own thing, and that sounds good, but actually, the self-employed are amongst the lowest paid, apart from a few, the lowest paid, particularly in the first 5 years. So the idea that entrepreneurial spirit is a solid bedrock needs to be analysed in some detail when you look at people. Now, people have the capacity. You can set up a very niche company from your bedroom now in a way that you couldn't do before. I mean, I have a friend who runs a wedding stationery. So it's not stationery, it's wedding stationery. It's bespoke designed wedding stationery. She runs it from her kitchen table. She uses her digital skills and she has a relationship with a printer, and because she now can get the volume, she can get the deals to get things done quickly, blah, blah. So you can see it's a lovely bit of niche. But I know that she really struggled for the first 5 years. And if it hadn't been for her parents, she wouldn't have survived. Now, not everybody's in that position. So this move to the entrepreneurial spirit isn't quite what it appears in terms of what it means for people. Interestingly, however, as one of the consequences I think of people coming out of the crash, and particularly corporates, and particularly because of the ethical questions that were being asked about the financial system, my experience lately of large organisations, and I've heard a number of different senior corporate people say this, often unsolicited, although they're saying it to me because they know who I am, not me, Ewan, but they know the role that I play. So they may be saying it because they think it's what I need to hear, but actually I've heard it often enough from unconnected people to think that it's potentially beginning to be culturally changed. They talk about how their CSR, their corporate social responsibility, the values of the corporate responsibility need to be embedded across the organisation and not simply it's what you do with the kind of little bit extra you've got. And that's an interesting impact because that suggests that whole concept of breaking down those barriers might have a positive because you're embedding different kind of ethical values in there. Now, I think we have a long way to go with that, and I think there are a significant number who are still not there. But I do get an impression. So, for example, I've just been appointed to the Council of the Chamber of Commerce because they want to engage with the third sector differently. You know, I just don't think that would have happened 5 years ago, 10 years ago. It does seem to me that there are pros and cons for the journey that's happening.
Do you feel you have the latitude to implement the policies you feel are important?
You mean within the organisation?
Yeah,
yeah. Oh no, I mean the board gives me huge devolved powers. They tell me, we want to know what you want to achieve, and then we want you to do whatever it takes to get to the point where it's achieved. So they don't interfere operationally, and that's absolutely brilliant because that's not the case in others. Right? Where the barriers come tend to be externally. So we've been working with the public sector about developing a care at home social enterprise, and we had a whole set of assumptions based on conversations with them about how things were going to be progressed in terms of the contract, and then along came somebody else and said, "Oh, I can't do that," and so the barrier to our achieving our end. And the policy which we want, which is to combine quality care at home with employability, has been, so that to me is how you turn enterprise into opportunity beyond the task that you're actually doing. The barrier to that is not, the policy, but the process with the partners that we require to work
with. Right. Well, are you able, through existing structures, to forge the connections with outside organisations that you think are important?
I'm going to be a little bit self-aggrandizing here, and I apologise for that. But I'm fortunate because of the things I have done previously, as I indicated earlier, to be able to get through bureaucracies that perhaps others might not have, or might not. Some can. I'm not the only one by any stretch of the imagination. But given I've only been in this job a year, I've been able to get to places where others who've been around for a long time perhaps haven't. So to that extent, I think the answer to the question is, generally speaking, yes. However, there are always challenges. I'm not as well connected in the private sector yet as I once was, as others are. But that's one of the reasons we're getting involved in the Chamber of Commerce. Will assist in that. That's one of the reasons we're doing that. And the public sector, when it's local authority and to some extent government, is something I know and comfortable with. The health board, however, is not quite so open. I know some people in there, but not as many. And I think health boards are particularly challenging in working out, particularly the split. So for example, the work we do in community gardens is primarily about community health, but actually the people we're targeted to help because we're on hospital sites are people whose responsibility falls under the acute part of the health board, and as yet we can't get the two to talk to each other.
Right.
So there's an example where I know the problem, but I can't sort it.
I've become aware of some situations where I suppose territory actions process seems to be divvied up, and one organisation struggles to do something because, of course, payment by results or whose outcome is it anyway?
Yeah. And this is what I was alluding to earlier. We have a huge problem over the hill on that one. Yeah. We were asked, and I think not unhelpfully, to work with the Homeless Prevention Service in collaboration with others. It means that you create consortia where you play to people's strengths. And so somebody comes along and says, "All right, well, actually, we can do this much, but actually, there's a level of need that organisation can do." So you move around, and that's good. That's good. If you do payment by results, however, and this is one of the challenges we've got, because what the council are saying to us is that it will only be the first organisation that gets paid, and we're saying so that so in other words, the first organisation that deals with the person will get paid, and that's it. And we're going. But that defeats the purpose of consortia where people can play to their strengths. And they're going, no, we're just going to keep it simple. And we're saying, well, that's simplistic, not simple, right? Simplistic is one organisation, one payment, that'll get it sorted. Whereas in fact, what that will do is undermine our ability to deliver for those people that we want to deliver for, because more often than not, folk come with one issue and have a variety of issues, and we need to be able to manage that. And therefore, payment by results as a concept isn't perhaps the best way of incentivizing us, if that's what they're trying to do, to achieve more outcomes.
Yeah. Do you feel the language used in these administrative structures, these superstructures and outcomes and measures, adequately represents the work you do?
A friend of mine who's a professor of linguistics at Glasgow University said to me that she spends much of her life writing in academic English, and what she knows is that it might be academic, and that words might form part of the English language, but it's not English. And she's absolutely right. And we have the same problem here. I mean, we laugh a lot about. I'm fluent in council speak, right? But do you know what? I cringe if I find myself using words like that when I have the opportunity to spend time with people, those we serve. Right? And we've got to say, it's a bit like many years ago. I was a youth worker in Glasgow, and Glasgow was divided up because it got some money from Europe, lots of money from Europe, and it was divided up into areas of poverty, because I had to define what those areas were for the European money to come in. This is the 1980s, we're talking a long time ago. And so I was working in Ruck Hill, which was part of the Mary Hill Corridor, it was called. And we had a big public meeting about some bit of funding that was coming through. It was a massive one. And this guy did this whole presentation where he talked about the community of the Mary Hill Corridor. Now, notwithstanding the fact the Mary Hill Corridor was a lines drawn on a map and a phrase invented by somebody in an office that bore no relation to people's experience. It was just a stupid thing to do, because he finished and this woman said, "Son, can I just say, I live in a house, no a corridor." And it's like, the place I'm up to, but it kind of was a metaphor for me of the madness of, using a concept and a language, and even, and in fact, a very bad metaphor when you were trying to talk about people's lives. It's a story I have never forgotten.
Yeah. What role should broader society play in facilitating the work of Cyrenians?
Well, I think that's a very interesting question. I believe, in fact, that there is an opportunity for us to stop thinking about three sectors: public, private, and third, and start talking about citizens and our rights and responsibilities as citizens, and what is it we do to reintroduce as an alternative to the kind of we're all autonomous beings individualism ideology that's been around for the last 50 years, the concept of, in meeting the needs of our neighbour, our own needs will be met. But doing so not because the third sector is the place where you do good stuff and everywhere else is where everything else happens, but that we're all citizens, and everything that we do in whatever context we're working in, whatever the name above the door, the name above the door, or the income model that's there, can be done for the benefit of your fellow citizens. So our pension scheme is run by Standard Life. If Standard Life makes sure that our pension scheme is as good as it can be for the staff who work here, so the staff who work here feel that they've got good reward for the work that they do, they will feel they will be more likely to stay at this job and to work harder. I mean, that's a very kind of simple kind of connection, but it means that somebody organising a pension scheme had kind of a direct impact on the quality of work that happens in a front line that they'll never know. But if they can have in their heads that there is a connection, because the contribution they make to making sure the person in the front line feels secure and supported will mean that they'll do their job better. And we do that because we're citizens. Seems to me to be the way in which we should articulate what you're doing, rather than saying, how can the third sector help the private sector help the third sector?
Right. So how might the clients, service users, the beneficiaries best support the Saronians developing and delivering the support? So you mean?
Well, I'd want to say that, in my view, we're all beneficiaries. The journeys that we all go on, and the ones that I'm probably going. I'm changed by this job as much as anybody else. My starting point is different, and the things that are changing in me might be different to somebody who arrives in our recovery service, for example. But we're on a journey of change, and we all have to be. So I mean, that's really important for what we're about. Otherwise, you fall into the trap of thinking that my life's sorted and other people's aren't they? Because I can tell you it's not. You know. So I think that's really important. I think that those things, the opportunities that you're asking about, are things that will evolve as a result of the quality of the relationships that we have. So it's not like there's a menu, but that there is. If we can create the right relationships, the right things will happen. So we had a group of volunteers. Many of whom have been in bad places and now on a different journey at Fair Share, and 20 of them went up and ran a water station as part of the Glen Nevis Challenge, whatever it was, a few weeks ago. Now, it was a day out. It was a day in the hills. Didn't cost them anything. Why should it? There was a bit of banter. There was some lunch. They did some stuff for other people. And all those experiences. In terms of their personal journey, it was a positive experience. You know, they don't get many chances to do that because of the circumstances they're in. So at one level, it was about just a thing to do that they wouldn't do otherwise. But it gave us publicity. It gave people an insight to what we did because they talked a lot to people. And as a consequence, the people organising the event gave us $5,000 towards Fair Share that we weren't expecting. Now, I can't set up a work plan or a set of outcomes that will mean, well, if we do this many of these, this will happen. What I need to do is create lots of contexts in where that kind of thing might happen, knowing that there's a good chance that in some places it will happen. Right? That's what it's about. And I suppose the thing most of all is if those whom we serve can be open to the idea that this is something different and we need to do that, we need to help them see that, but then if they can be able to go to the doctors to get a pill, or go to the brew to get your benefits, but that there's more about, this is about the human relationships we create on the journey that we take, then they will be providing what is needed for Saronians to continue to do more for them and for
others. I'm interested in the area, in this general area. Is there recommended reading? Do you think is there a book that comes to mind that you think this I thought was really good at broadening my view and getting into these nutty problems, these?
Good question. I think it depends what's there, because I suppose my job is so diverse that there are many different things. So what's on my bookshelf here that I would say have helped me in some way or others, but So this is an organisational one. That my chair gave me that when I first arrived. So organisationally, I would say that is very helpful. Yeah, so here you go. Right. If you want to talk politics, that's one of the best books I've read of understanding why political decisions are made. Right. It's written by a guy who's a neuroscientist and a political animal. Right. So he talks about the politics of the brain and what the brain does politics. It's very, very good.
Fantastic.
Right. This is about Myers. I like Myers-Briggs. People use lots of different things. I don't know if you come across Myers-Briggs. It's a type indicator. It's a personality type. Yeah. So, because I'm comfortable that I use it, there are lots. There's the Enneagram. There's IDI. All of them have merit. I would not judge one to be better than the other. I just was introduced this 20 years ago and I like it. But that's really helpful. This is a classic. That whole business about taking risks. Okay. This book I really recommend you reading because it tells you something about the Scottish culture. She is an amazing woman. She runs the Scottish Centre for the Scottish Centre for Confidence and Wellbeing. Right? She really gets a grip with that whole business about the culture of the Scots, the sense of confidence, where it comes from, the whole religious element to it, and all that kind of stuff. So that's brilliant. And I've always been a fan of emotional intelligence and understanding that. So if I was so there's lots. Depends what you're doing. You know.
Brilliant. That's a library I can write down. I will make good use of. I really appreciate that. In regards to and I've just got. I know you time's short, so just have you got thinking about the document I've written and about how I've been trying to zoom in right close to the problems I've encountered with the paperworks that govern my life, and sometimes when I've wanted and needed a human interface, there's not been, and I'm getting better at this, but it's only through the human interface that I improve through other people. I'm lucky enough that way to encounter that. So have you any thoughts on what I've written there?
I mean, what you said in essence is, it seems to me, is that it's that tension I described earlier on. You captured it, which is that business about in the end, the only person that'll ever tell your story will be you, right? But I need to be able to tell your story too.
Yes.
But I also need to be in some ways able to tell other people's story as well. But do so in a way that's consistent. Right? Because otherwise people say, well, how can you show that you had that? You know, us going on the journey was part of the change. Right? And are you comparing like with like? Okay. So, I think what you're trying to do is to turn that tension into a positive, because I think tension is energy, and energy can be positive or negative, right? So it feels to me you're grappling with that, and you're not far away, because what you're saying is in the end it depends on the quality of the human relationships that are involved, right? This bit, I was struck by this. There's this section here. This bit where you're talking about the collaboration of the and the outcome star, but also how the outcome star gets in the way. I was quite struck by that. In other words, its very existence gets in the way of the thing it's trying to do, right? Seemed to me to be, is that, I don't know if that's an accurate description of, you know, and yet I think what we have to do, well, what I have to do is accept the limitations and try and make the best of it, because if I don't, I won't be able to do the things I need to do so I can help the people and help my staff walk with the people I want us to walk with. So it's flawed and it's human, but it's that reality, and we're not yet at a place in terms of those for whom we are dependent on for resource to do otherwise. Okay, so when children need, for example, we've reduced our the things that we require folk down to 3 outcomes. So we need to know what is it you're trying to achieve on 3 different ways. And we do it 3 different ways. So it can be 3 different things, but with the same, because we recognise that it can be different things. We only ask them to put it in 250 words because we want them to be concise and simple, not simplistic, but simple. And we don't want to add to the burden. But we do want to be able to say what it is that's happening, so that when we go out on the telly and ask for money, we're telling the truth.
Yeah.
Right? So, and we wouldn't get that money. What was it, 31 million last year or something like that, if we didn't have something of that order. And that's it. Even if you're like Shelter, who took a decision about 10 years ago to significantly reduce their dependence on public sector and significantly increase their fundraising element, so that they had much more freedom to campaign, which is what they wanted to do, and good on them, still have to be able to tell the story so they can persuade people to fundraise more.
Yeah.
So
with the conversation I opened up with the outcomes star, the people who theorise it and develop it, I asked whether there's a space, because in itself it can be a very useful tool. But I asked, is there a space to create an annex where people can create their own stories? So I'm very booky. Not everybody's booky. Not everybody likes writing, but some people might like to talk or make video entry to append to accompany the outcome star, so that it adds depth.
And well, in my view, the answer is yes. And in fact, we do wee hints of that. And when you describe it in those terms, I realised that's what we're doing. I didn't know that's what we're doing, but that's what we're doing. So I don't know if you've looked at any of the videos that are on our website.
Not yet.
No, you should have a look. So we've got some ones about conflict resolution. We've got a lovely one of a mother and a daughter talking about a mother and a son talking about their experience of the conflict resolution service. And another one that's done in cartoonish, so the person reads it and somebody else draws cartoons to represent what they're saying. It's lovely. It's really, really good. We've also, and this is one of the joys of modern technology, there's a cracking little video being made by the recovery service, a guy called Craig, and I can say that because it's public, who was an addict for 20 years and ended up nearly dying because he had septicemia in the hospital, and he was like that, close to death. So he said, I've got to get fit, and he went to the doctors. The doctors put him on a recovery, a medical recovery program, and after 6 months it was doing his head in. And to his credit, and Craig credits the doctor. The doctor says, you didn't need me, you need somebody to talk to, and he sent him to us. And Craig's now been clean for 3 years. But they made a video. Craig made a wee video of that story about him, and he walked past where he used to live and all that kind of stuff, and all that. It tells me stories, but they did it all on an iPad, and it's really good. The quality's okay, and there's something actually quite quite powerful about the rawness of it. You know, it's not done with lights and all the rest of it. It's just Craig talking to the iPad, and it's really clever. And I'm intrigued that that's what we've done, and I hadn't realised that I can see a real role for that. I can see a real role for that. It would seem to me to be. And in fact, what I'd want to say is, it should be embedded as a key element rather than seen as an add-on. You know, because it would give it much more. Right? Here's the good come star. This is what they said. And here's them telling the story of what that means to them.
Because doing this and the encouragement and support to read, to know more about my world, to create this document has been a huge growth experience for me. And Oscar and Evelyn have been instrumental in this. And I wonder whether that. I
like that idea. I like it a lot.
The final question would have to be.
Don't worry, I'm really enjoying myself.
What questions do you think are what questions do you think are important in working towards greater understandings?
At the heart of the human condition is the desire for meaning and contentment. And you need to begin with those questions. So, when we're on the journey, it's a journey. It might theoretically be a journey towards, overcoming addiction or getting your house back or no longer following your mother or whatever. But at the heart of it is, how do I get the meaning and the contentment, which means that that's a possibility. And that's the first stage of understanding. What is it that will take for that person? Because for each person, the answer to that will be different. So that requires quite deep listening skills on the behalf of those who are on the journey. It seems to me that what Oscar and Evelyn did was listen to you and then say, well, what about, and create the opportunity for you to turn what you had articulated through their listening into something of significance to you. Because this is intellectually robust, but actually what you tell me, it makes you feel good.
It does.
Right? You experience that sense of contentment and I'm going to make presumptions here and correct me if I'm wrong here, but the dislocation and that you felt with your life before meant that you were making choices that were not wise. Right? Okay, if that's an accurate thing, right? Yeah. But you're now connected to. It's what you said to me first came in. You're connected to others, but most importantly, you're connected to yourself.
Yeah.
And this is why David Hume talked about how reason is a slave to the passions. It is how we feel first and foremost that we make most sense of the world. And we need to listen to people very carefully. And then from that listening, work out what it is that might be that they will get to the place they need to be, so they will find that and experience that contentment and that and so find that sense of meaning and purpose.
Fantastic.
I don't know if that all makes sense, but that's what I think.
It really, it does. And I mean, I'd like to, I'm going to be continuing this exploration, see what I can, for me, meaning and contentment is about being able to put back to the places which has kept, there's a field of very tired angels. And for me, I want to put back where the blessings. So finding something constructive to say, constructive to do, is part of my path. And this analysis, if I can do a video, if I can, push a broom around the floor, just let me know.
No, Winnie, we will. In fact, I'm surprised they haven't asked you before. Actually, what you've just done there is really helpful because one of the things that I need to do what I need to do well is to have spaces and time to think. And so that series of questions, I'm serious. I really enjoyed it because it's real. It's part of what I do. It will help me do my job better because I've not had to make any decisions for a period of time. Well, I've had a chance to think and re-articulate again and again, because it's not like you reach these decisions and it's all sorted. You need to keep doing it and keep doing it and keep doing it. So even that has been of real assistance to me, as was grappling with this, even though there were lots of big words and I didn't understand. Yeah. And I mean, has there been anything specific or that you wanted to have a go at, or?
Well, I mean, I'm starting a law degree at the OU, and I mean, I want to. I'm interested in these outcomes and measurements. I read through the theory of the outcome star. I went to the original sources.
Well, let's stick to that then, because it's my intention to implement the right outcome star right across the organisation. So let us make you our critical friend.
It would be lovely to facilitate, doing how individuals like me. Do you want to paint a series of pictures? Do a contemporary dance that helps you express that's yours?
Yes.
Or whatever's most appropriate. I want to be able to hear the other side of the fence, because this is a lot. My voice was important, as you've given me the chance to hear. I mean, it's tricky being sitting in your seat, and you've helped me understand the part of the world that I've not got any ken about. And if I can understand that from Oscar's, Evelyn's, Karen's, everybody, maybe when we look at the overlap, something might pop out.
Yeah. No, I absolutely think that's the case, and I would just encourage you to keep talking to us. Amy's going to be leading this. Do you know Amy? So she's one of the leaders. She's going to be leading on this. I will give her this as a starting point. And then I will get her to come and have a chat with you, and we'll see where that takes us.
Thank you very much.
All right, Joy. Good to meet you.